Some people would like kids to believe in evolution. They want them to believe that we all came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago, and they have to give them some evidence. One of the evidences presented in just about every textbook is this one right here. This textbook says we have evidence of evolution from molecular biology. Now, what do they mean by that? Well, molecular, of course, means at the molecule level, very, very, very tiny, and biology is the study of life. Bio means life, ology means the study of. So they're saying the study of extremely small branches of life, the molecules, gives evidence for evolution. A molecule is very tiny. A good illustration to understand how small a molecule is, the best one I know of, is a grain of salt. You know how small a grain of salt is, right? 1 cube of salt is very tiny. If you took a grain of salt and expanded it so that it was as tall as the Sears Tower, 1,200 feet tall, I believe the Sears Tower is, and 1,200 feet wide and 1,200 feet deep. If you expanded it to that size, the molecules would expand at the same ratio. They would become large enough that they would become the size of the original grain of salt. How many grains of salt would it take to stack up to be equal to the top of the Sears Tower? Several, right? That's how many molecules are stacked up the side of a cube of salt. So molecules are extremely tiny, and they're telling the kids that we've got evidence from molecular biology. 1911 biology textbook doesn't mention DNA at all, does it? How about the 1925 textbook? No mention at all. What do you find in yours, Steve? About molecular biology. Or DNA.
DNA, I guess that three natural processes underlying evolution.
They emphasize evolution in every case, right? Did you find it in yours? About DNA? Yeah, all the new textbooks say DNA offers evidence for evolution. Well, now, DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. It is a molecule. The DNA molecule is the most complicated molecule in the universe that is known today. This textbook says the greater the percentage of DNA sequence, the greater they have, the more they have in common. In other words, they're comparing the sequences and saying this proves some kind of similarity. This textbook says Darwin speculated that all forms of life are related through descent with modification from earliest organisms. Earliest organisms. This speculation has been verified as we have learned more about molecular biology. Look what they're teaching the kids in this book. They're saying Darwin guessed that everything was related. Now we know it's true. That's the propaganda the kids have to face. Now we know it's true. Now just hold on a minute. If there are similar DNA sequences, and we'll get into that in a minute, would that prove we're related? Or could it prove we have the same designer? So what happens here, we get into a logical fallacy. They say, well, look, because we're similar DNA to these organisms, therefore we must be related. I say, no, no, no. We have a common designer. So don't fall into the trap that this proves evolution or even helps to support evolution. It does not. This is a picture of a DNA molecule. If you took a ladder, if we had a long extension ladder, a real long extension ladder that went about from here to Chicago, and we had one end, somebody holding that end still in Chicago, and here I am in Florida, and I start twisting my end of the ladder, and twist it around and around and around. So like twisting up a watch band, okay? The individual rungs of the ladder are called the genes, G-E-N-E. So when they talk about genetic similarity, that's what they're talking about. These genes are similar. So if we have this ladder that goes from Florida to Chicago, and we have twisted it up in a long spiral, the two sides of the ladder stay the same distance apart, but it kind of curves as it goes around, and the rungs of the ladder, the round part, will hold it that distance apart, but now it's like a spiral staircase. If we twist it and twist it and twist it, it starts pretty soon to knot in on itself, so it's actually double twisted. And you can tell by the picture here, if you take a DNA molecule and unwind it, it becomes incredibly long. You figure the average human body has 50 trillion cells. The only cell visible to the naked eye is the egg cell that a woman produces in order to have a baby. All other cells in the body are too small to see without at least a good magnifying glass, and in most cases, a microscope. With a real strong magnifying glass, you can see cells, You can we did experiments in biology class where you take a popsicle stick and you scrape the inside of your cheek, and you can get skin cells off very easily. Put it on a piece of glass, stick it under the microscope, add a little iodine, and it will stain the cells, and you can actually study the different parts of the cell. A cell is sort of like, I guess an egg is the best example, at least in an animal cell, because they have an outer membrane that is soft, and then all the stuff, there's thousands of things inside the cell. One cell is more complicated than a city. But inside the cell is another little membrane that holds the nucleus. Like inside the egg is the yolk, the yellow part to the egg. Inside that nucleus are the DNA molecules. So we're talking really, really tiny. DNA wasn't even discovered until probably the middle of this century. You can see the old textbooks don't even mention it at all. Francis Crick and somebody else, I forget his name, got a Nobel Prize for discovering the DNA molecule. I think it was in the 1950s when they got that. So they called it the double helix because it twists and then it twists again while it's twisted. Those DNA molecules are incredibly tiny. But if you unwound one of them, it would be about 6 or 7 feet long. 46 of these DNA molecules, and one DNA molecule is called a chromosome. Each chromosome contains millions of genes.
We are now able to see how DNA is actually copied in living cells. You are looking at an assembly line of amazing miniature biochemical machines that are pulling apart the DNA double helix and cranking out a copy of each strand. The DNA to be copied enters the production line from bottom left. The whirling blue molecular machine is called helicase. It spins the DNA as fast as a jet engine as it unwinds the double helix into 2 strands. One strand is copied continuously and can be seen spooling off to the right. Things are not so simple for the other strand because it must be copied backwards. It is drawn out repeatedly in loops and copied one section at a time. The end result is 2 new DNA molecules.
So the gene is like the rung of the ladder. The entire thing is called the chromosome. You have 46 of these in each cell in your body, except for the gametes. Now, a gamete is a sex cell. The egg and the sperm are called gametes. They each have 23, half of the genetic information. And when a woman gets pregnant, the half from the male and the half from the female join together and makes it back to 46. So a fertilized embryo, a fertilized egg, and now has 46 chromosomes. You've got half from the mother and half from the father. So during the process when it divides, it's called a gamete.